Date: Standardized Human Time, October 3, 2136. Accompanying Marcel to visit his tormentor was my overarching desire, but persuading the predator proved an impossible task. It baffled me why he believed this confrontation was something he needed to tackle alone. The worry I felt for my human was tremendous. I couldn't imagine how traumatic it was to encounter Sovlin, with the roles reversed. Beyond that, it was terrifying to be stranded on Earth, without him to protect me. Whenever something frightened me, there was the comforting assurance that the vegetarian would fix it. I was beginning to understand that Marcel shielded me from the predatory side of humanity, to the best of his ability. Who was there to filter the stimuli around me now? You need to get used to humans on your own, Slanek. Toughen up, I chided myself. That orphan toddler is twice as brave as you. Nulia seemed anxious without her scarred predator. The poor thing must be fearful of being abandoned again. Tyler landed babysitting duty for the Gojid child, while her guardian was away. The meat-eater had finally retired to his room, trying to get both of them some shut-eye. As baby-ish as it would have been, I wished I tagged along. Every shadow that danced on the wall seemed like a dog sneaking up on me. There was no chance of getting a wink of sleep, knowing I was trapped in a land of predators alone. How could any sane species leave their varmint alive? With a frustrated sigh, I jabbed a claw on the remote. It was a bad idea to watch their television without supervision, but the boredom was stirring up the dark side of my imagination regardless. The screen opposite the bed flickered to life, set to a news channel by default. A stern-looking female had her intense, predatory eyes fixed on the camera. "Ever trust the Federation?" she asked. "None of their information about predators has been correct. The continued survival of the human race is due to their astonishing incompetence, their fundamental lack of curiosity. You, your children, and your loved ones are vermin to be killed to them. These aliens take offense to your existence. Not the Venlil." I yipped, knowing that she couldn't hear me. The UN ambassador and the Venlil governor never returned from a summit where they tried to negotiate with these genocidal maniacs. At this point, we have to presume that Noah Williams was murdered. Maybe it's time to give the feds a dose of the predators they're asking for. Is this why the Archer turned on them? How were they really treated at first contact? That statement made my blood boil. How could any human argue with the mountain of footage depicting Archer sadism? It was an undisputed fact that the Federation uplifted those predators, gifting the means to blaze a trail of destruction. Hadn't the Terran soldiers returned with stories of the Greys rounding up cattle and snacking on living Gojids mid-battle? Surely, no humans bought this outrageous line of thinking. This had to be a sensationalist take to garner publicity for her broadcast. That, or it was satire. I failed to see the humor, but then again, I always took a literal interpretation of things. Terran comedy could be pretty dark and tasteless, from the jokes I heard on my deployment. Nothing excuses cannibalism and xenocide to those who will inevitably take my words out of context. I just don't see a reason to accept a bigot's narrative without any critical thinking. Recent intelligence suggests ship movement in the Crocodile. The hotel door clicked open without warning, which startled me upright. What if it was UN security guards, coming to secure my room with a dog? That creature was going to be my nightmare fuel for months. I could vividly picture it ripping off a Venlil limb with a toss of its ugly head. My fear morphed to relief as I saw it was Marcel, who bore an exhausted look on his face. The predator's emotions must be depleted after such a taxing journey. He flopped back first on the bed, allowing the residual tension to ebb from his shoulders. I assaulted him with a hug and ignored the groan as I knocked the wind out of him. "Easy, buddy," the human grunted. "It's only been a day." I emitted a happy mewl as he settled me onto his chest with his uninjured arm. The room's dark environment felt much brighter with my friend to shepherd me. Nothing could harm me when he was around, not even a dog. The human tickled my chin with a low chuckle, and I rested my paws atop his stomach. My eyes met his piercing gaze. I was worried sick about you. How did it go? Are you okay? I'm fine. I think I'm ready to move forward, he replied. But I don't want to talk about it. Let's talk about something else, all right? Sure. How about what kind of predators humans are? Shit, Slanek. Do we have to discuss that now? It's 1 in the morning. Yes, we do. You promised, and I think I deserve the truth. It's like you don't trust me, even after all we've been through together. Marcel searched my expression, a mix of concern and affection in his eyes. The human seemed reluctant to answer. His fear of losing me was palpable, from how his fingers tightened around my fur. What could be so sinister that it would alter my view of him, after all this time? I trusted him with my life. If my stupid instincts didn't get in the way, I would take a bullet for him. It's complicated, he growled, after several seconds of silence. Humans have employed every predation strategy in the book. Like Tyler said, dogs have helped us. We've set traps, used ambush tactics, fished, raised livestock. Yes, I know you hate that word. But you ask. I tilted my head. You said you weren't ambush predators. We're versatile. Anyhow, what people claim we are, is one of the oldest hunting strategies known to mankind. It's called persistence hunting. The human paused, as though expecting a dramatic reaction. My blank stare seemed to disappoint him, his lips curved downward even further. I could tell how much he disliked this topic, but we had already gotten this far. Is that persistence hunting phrase supposed to mean something to me? Continue? I don't get it, I pressed. Humans possess a high endurance because of our sweating ability. We can run a lot longer, especially in the hot climates we originated in. Marcel closed his eyes, unable to meet my gaze. We were never faster than our prey. We just had more stamina. We chased them until they stopped running. A chill ran down my spine as I processed the meaning of those words. Was he telling me that humans pursued their prey for hours, maybe even days? That they never tired, or gave up on a pursuit? Such an ordeal meant their quarry had an eternity to contemplate their demise. The victims spent their last day in a desperate, agonized flight. Their terror lasted much longer than the split second of an ambush. My brain began to imagine running from a human, feeling the burning of my muscles and my lungs. The savage predator would draw closer, every time I paused to rest or dampen my pace. Knowing all the while that the second my legs gave out, my death was a certainty. There was no hope of escape, short of confronting the hunter. What an awful way to go. Having your own body betray you, and languishing in a pool of chemical exhaustion. The predator would slowly approach, bloodlust in its eyes, signifying the end. I thought humans showed mercy. They conducted themselves like reasonable, kind, and feeling people, not relentless beasts that inflicted torment on the weak. Tears streamed down my face at the thought of my human partaking in that sort of predation. It felt awful to think of him in that regard. If he was born a few thousand years ago, would he have chased helpless creatures through the scorching heat too? Was that what was coded in his instincts? Slanek? Gosh, you're shaking. Marcel rubbed my ear comfortingly. Say something, please. Even if it's that you hate me. Sadness seeped onto his expression, which knocked some sense back into me. It was painful to see how heartbroken he looked. I resisted the urge to swat his hand away, and attempted to regain my wits. The predator's honesty was admirable when he foretold precisely how I would react. I knew, in my soul, that my human would never dream of harming me. It was time to stop fixating on their heritage, as much as anything predatory frightened my instincts. Humanity left their gruesome past behind, and had proven themselves more than capable of empathy. My reactions were the product of a stupid, irrational phobia. I wanted to love them fully, without awful thoughts creeping into my head all the time. Oh, okay. Persistence. Got it, I stammered. The human blinked. What? I accept you, F or whatever you are, because I care about you. No matter what. The predator clutched me tighter and restrained his own tears. It was important for Marcel to know that he didn't have to apologize for his existence. After wrestling with wretched self-doubts, my acceptance was essential for his mental welfare. Humans didn't need to alter themselves to prove they were worthy of our friendship. Thank you, he whispered. Keep it between us, please. I'll get in trouble for telling you. I flicked my ears. Okay. That is an awful form of predation, which doesn't exist on our world, so I get why you avoided the subject. But Tarva deserves to know. She would still stand by you, I'm certain. I'd hope the governor would take heart, knowing the fruit our roots have borne. We just do the best with what we have in our tool set. Humans are survivors, whatever it takes, we have the resolve and the dedication. How is that encouraging in any way, Mark? Maybe it will help you to realize the lengths we would go for you, our Venlil friends. And you'll know that we will hunt the Arxer to the ends of the universe, that there will be nowhere they can hide. We'll battle a scourge like that as long as our species survives. Marcel's argument was persuasive enough when he phrased it like that. The Terran pledged to liberate sentient farm worlds, and all of their military aspirations felt much more feasible. An arduous war wouldn't daunt humanity like it did for us. I suppose there was another positive to their hunting methodology, in that it wasn't a deceptive art. They had no reason to employ trickery or extend a hand in a false friendship. This could be conveyed as a reason to trust humanity if they played their cards right. You should get one of the UN people to tell me. You'll need to be more tactful with most Venlil, framing is everything. I pinned my ears against my head, trying to keep a storm of negative emotions at bay. I can think of a way to make your ancestry more palatable. Maybe just say you can withstand heat better, so your desert pursued predators. Or shift the focus to your recent cattle practices. I'm not sure a close examination of factory farms is a good idea either. Never mind that. You took that better than I expected, by far, Slanek. I want to stop panicking, but I don't know how. My knee-jerk reactions aren't what I really think, once my brain comes around. But sometimes, usually, I can't control it. You deserve a better friend. I ducked my head, feeling shame roll down my spine. Despite my constant efforts, my brain refused to forget that these lumbering primates were predators. My subconscious reminded me at every turn that humans weren't like us, and that they could morph into feral beasts at any second. Marcel did deserve so much better. All that time he wastes comforting me, and trying to calm me down. I'm a burden. A loser. Are you kidding? I got paired with the best Venlil. Marcel offered his signature snarl, which was menacing yet gentle. I wanted to be a part of the first contact program so bad. Do you know how many questions we had to answer? 30? 50? How many? 200, plus an in-person interview, a background check, and a psychological exam. All of my communications were analyzed since first contact, for any red flags. What was your selection process like? I volunteered. Right. I'm sure there weren't a lot of takers for your position, the red-haired human chuckled. There was no guarantee that my partner would get past seeing me. You know from the stories around the outpost that some people didn't. That was a true statement. Several Venlil fainted once in proximity of their pen pals, and were taken to the infirmary. A smaller minority abandoned the program altogether, due to meeting their Terran counterparts. I remembered how my fear had been almost painful that first day. It was no wonder a few Venlil found the humans too intimidating for cohabitation. Still, I couldn't imagine how those predators felt, being rejected on sight after weeks of chatting. The worst horror story was a Venlil that panicked at a human stepping into her room and leapt into self-defense mode. She grabbed the nearest sharp object, which was a pair of scissors, and plunged it into the Terran's shoulder. Her partner, while wounded, was able to wrestle the blade from her claws. The violence was not returned. The predator didn't press charges, for some reason, despite Venlo government's offer to prosecute. Meanwhile, Marcel and I shared potato chips on our first day. Not the worst pairing he could have had, I suppose. Anyways, I talked to Lucy, you know, my fiancée, on the ride here. She wants me to come home, but I've gotten used to having you around. Marcel took a deep breath, scratching his stubbly scalp. Maybe it's not the right time to ask, after what I just told you. No, I'm calm now. Go on. How would you feel about living with us? You can come and go as you please. Any time you want to return to Venlo Prime, you don't have to stay. But we'll take care of all of your expenses, whenever you want to be here. I gaped at him. The idea of a permanent residence with my human filled my chest with warmth, but Earth was as alien as any world could get. A trial period was all I could commit to see how I handled prolonged exposure to a predatory environment. Would the UN, or technically, the regional government be okay with my staying? I'll think about it. Does that mean you're going to receive a military discharge? No. But I've requested a transfer home, so I can live planet-side. I'll only be involved with the defense of Earth, should that be necessary. And what about Nolia? She needs you more than I do. She'd be devastated if she ends up in a camp, alone. Don't be ridiculous. We're going to adopt her. I already spoke with Meyer about the necessary paperwork, and he's going to contact the American State Department. They're starting from scratch on that one, I think. The Gojid child would be elated. I wondered how being raised by predators would impact her development, but I knew she'd grow up in a loving environment. It was obvious the human considered her to be his own daughter, and would care for her accordingly. There wasn't a more touching tale than to witness these pursued hunters rescuing the children of a species that swore to destroy Earth. Sounds like you've got it all figured out. Muzzle, I whispered. Why, you fluffy little shit. The human glowered at me, while I feigned ignorance. Don't you dare start that, too. I can and will rescind my offer. I wagged my tail. Too late. No take-backs. My family back on Venlo Prime would say I was suicidal to accept, but the more I thought about his proposition, the more enticing it seemed. Navigating humanity's diplomatic hurdles, helping a predator raise a prey child, and protecting their planet from harm could be my new calling. Maybe one day, Earth would even feel like my home. At any rate, free rent sounded pretty darn good to my ears. In a half-day, our ship would reach the edge of Republic space, and we'd be able to transmit communications back to our UN contacts. The Terrans had been slated to open an embassy on Venlo Prime a few days after our original departure. That meant they would have a full diplomatic staff on world, and would be available to help humans abroad. Many Terran nations requested their own embassies so they could conduct their affairs as separate entities. While I liked the predators, I wasn't giving out an absurd 198 embassies versus every other species' singular site. Humans were welcome to bicker amongst themselves about who could send their own diplomatic corps, and how to divide the turf, if they must. I had no interest in making their discordance my business. My focus was on smoothing over both of our relations with the Federation. It was also a priority to stabilize my friend's mental health, especially after weeks of isolation and boredom. Learning how the human mind coped with stress would be useful down the road. After careful consideration of the astronauts' mannerisms, I decided there was no major cause for alarm. All of our research showed that humans were highly social creatures. Ambassador Noah perked up just from having new conversation partners at hand. A few days to unwind, in the company of his own people, and he'd be begging to get back into the field. He only needed to recharge his batteries, as the Terrans said. Noah's excelled in quite an uncomfortable position. Volunteering with the belief that he would be a martyr. Standing in as a representative for his whole species. That kind of pressure has to pile up. In conclusion, the International Space Station proved that humanity can cooperate in the stars. The Predator was finishing a story I'd heard before. He had a rapt audience in our Mazik passenger. That scientists see our beautiful Earth differently from above. The ISS was our first foothold off-world. It paved the path for lunar colonies and set a precedent of joint exploration. So then, why has your planet still not united under a single banner, Noah? You do not care for distant members of your species without a, shall I say, stellar view, came the scoffing response. When President Cupo's question reached my ears, I was concerned that other diplomats would voice similar concerns. The Mazik still seemed leery of the human, despite being thrice the weight of the Predator. No offense to Noah, but I'm pretty sure the beige prey animal could knock him out with a stamp of his flat paw, easily. Humanity's internal divisions were a disquieting issue to the galaxy as a whole. The newcomers seemed to be trying to work up the courage to ask about it for days. With the external threat of predation in our formative years, prey species had to maintain unity. Cooperation was our bread and fruit spread, so to speak. Indulging in petty squabbles would have gotten us killed. I'd seen several exit interviews with various leaders before we left signal range of Alpha. Many dissenters cited Earth's disputes as proof that the Predators were incapable of cooperation. It was their main evidence that the primates were still warlike and disagreeable. Humans evolved in a lot of small tribes, which later became nation-states. These each have their own distinct culture, beliefs, music, stories, cuisine, and languages, the Terran ambassador replied, leaning back in his seat. It would be losing a part of our heritage to renounce that, and because of our differing viewpoints, we don't always agree on how things should be done. Cupo flared his trunk. But why can you not maintain your practices under a common entity? You claim freedom of beliefs are a core value. It would be like you unifying with the Neveks. You may like each other plenty, perhaps you are even allies, but you would not abide by the same jurisdiction. We have common forums, alliances, and trade agreements, so Nikonus was quite mistaken in thinking we do not speak the language of diplomacy. We work together when it matters. It didn't escape my notice that Tassa, the Nevek representative, was watching with interest. The Sifkit, Zerolian, and Yodel occupants were also observing the exchange. None of them were being subtle with how their ears were swiveled toward the Predator. The other Federation diplomats had flown with Riesel in a separate ship, too daunted to embark on a human-infested vessel. Cupo was just the only one bold enough to voice what they all are thinking. Now, the floodgates are open, I thought. I better be ready to intervene if Noah gets overwhelmed. Predator Noah, please forgive my impertinence. Lalo, the Yodel diplomat, spoke in a measured tone. The uplift had given the human a wide berth, but at least was able to meet his startling gaze. Do humans still fight wars when you, disagree? Sometimes. One always hopes those quarrels can be resolved with words. Rest assured, a common threat, like the Arxer, should place any of our lingering disputes on the back burner. The Federation representatives looked baffled by that answer. As I learned early on, the national affairs of Earth were a complex matter. It was imprudent to deal with any nation individually, since that could be construed as favoritism. Most of the humans' rhetoric was posturing, but they were always locked in jealous competition. It was strange how human tribes perceived their interests as separate. They had much more in common than divided them, and they even seemed to recognize their folly when asked. It was one of several areas I had pointed out to renowned neuroscientist Ilya for closer study. I suspect a human's temper can run much hotter, much quicker than ours, Chao Sun offered, in a matter-of-fact tone. None of my research suggests their end goal is loss of life. It is just the result of aggression. Their predatory inclination is to deal with a perceived threat through violence, rather than fleeing. Not fully accurate, Doc. Humans have a fight or flight response, Noah growled. We can panic or freeze, just like you. It varies from person to person, and what temperament they have. Some of us are wholly incapable of aggression. A contemplative silence fell over our entourage, and Chow Sun scribbled something in his sketchbook. The last tidbit was news to me too. I assumed aggression was part of every predator's natural makeup, since that ferocity facilitated their ancestors' survival. Were there really some humans as timid and anxious as us, that cowered at threats like Venlo? If so, it was obvious Noah was not one of those humans. While the ambassador was skilled at masking his emotions, hostility seeped through whenever he saw the Venlo threatened. Its source was almost paternal. The look in his eyes at first contact, when he watched the Greys tormenting our pups, was apoplectic. Lots of compassionate humans were angry when they saw those videos. I wish we were home, so the Federation could meet the volunteer doctors and aid workers. It's been too. A rattling noise hummed through the ship walls, jolting me out of my thoughts. This time, it was more insistent than its previous occurrences throughout the journey. There was no reason a ship which deployed a year ago should experience issues, but it roused some worries nonetheless. Hey, Tarva? Not to stir up panic, but is that grating sound normal? The Terran ambassador asked. Something felt off with the shuttle since it took flight. The Predator's unease validated my suspicions. I was inclined to propose further investigation, even though we were one territory away from home. The last thing we needed was to be stranded in space, with a bunch of skittish diplomats and an inoperable ship. I tilted my head. No, it's not. I'm going to run a ship diagnostic, just to be safe. Lalo raised a peach-colored paw. It's coming from the cooling shaft. We should take a look there. As if you know, Tassa scoffed. I'd hardly trust your ilk to fix a sailboat. The printing press is a novelty to you primitives. Were your ancestors born with spaceships? Noah glowered at her, and the Nevik froze under his ocular intensity. I didn't know we were graced by the presence of a species who were endowed with divine knowledge. Tassa quivered, her icy fur raising along her hackles. We found our way on our own. We didn't have everything handed to us. The Yodel would have learned on their own, with time. You interfered in their natural development, so that they could join your war. Are you daft, Predator? The Arxer don't give a grain stalk about natural development. And neither do you, with your insensitive and tone-deaf comments. How the fuck did you become a diplomat? Lalo looked aghast at the Predator's vehement defense of his species. I think he assumed that the ambassador didn't know the Yodel's origins, but it was obvious the human had done his homework. The marsupial was likely surprised that the Terran would side with him, especially when he was accustomed to verbal beatdowns from fellow diplomats. It was apparent that Noah had lost all patience with the vitriolic rhetoric toward the uplift. Tassa's condescension, singling the Yodel out at every turn, rubbed my friend the wrong way. However noble his outburst, the last thing we needed was for him to alienate an influential ally. The Neviks could be a crucial supplier of resources and ship parts to Earth. Axley, the Civkit representative, was sobbing from the primate's raised voice. She had yet to speak a word to Noah, only introducing herself to the rest of us while he was asleep. A shouting match wasn't the way to calm her nerves either. Stop it, both of you, I hissed. Every second we spend bickering, the Arxer win. Let's be respectful to each other, all right? The human drew a shuddering breath. My apologies, Governor. I'm not the type to stand idle while someone else is mocked and bullied. It's not mockery, Predator. I'm merely stating facts, Tassa said. My name is not Predator. It's Noah, Ambassador Williams, or if that's too fucking difficult, I'll settle for human. Sorry about that, Lalo muttered. The human snorted. You're fine. At least you used my name. The Nevik curled her lip. Predator is just a word, which does describe you. You're too defensive, Noah. So you can pronounce it. Fascinating. Despite my best efforts, the two of them were still at each other's throats. Whoever managed Terran relations with the Nevik Imperium, it couldn't involve Noah in any way. The human was so incensed by his counterpart's attitude that he hadn't noticed Axley balling up into a fetal position. I believed he would have backed down if he realized the fright his ire had caused. Not another word. I swished my tail in frustration. Noah, you are coming with me, alone, and that's not up for discussion. I'm going to run a diagnostic, and we'll see if Lalo's intuition is correct. The Terran ambassador opened his mouth to argue, but then followed my pupils toward the sniveling Sifkit. His expression softened, replaced by a worried furrow of his brow. That agitation might have undone any progress with the Mazik too. President Cupo had inched away from the human, and was trying to comfort Axley with soothing words. The timid female was unresponsive, rocking back and forth. At least our Zerulean friend seemed to enjoy that, I mused. Chow Sun was trying to be the ship's stenographer during that whole exchange. Noah lowered his gaze and strode over to me with dejection. The Predator risked a glance over his shoulder, making eye contact with Lalo. The marsupial mouthed his gratitude, and the Terran's posture relaxed. He gave the Yodel a slight nod of acknowledgement before shuffling into the cockpit. I hovered by the ship computer, pulling up the troubleshooting module. It would take several seconds to complete a cursory scan, which would give Noah's temper time to blow over. I hoped that nothing was amiss with the vessel. The implications of a defect would be unpleasant. I didn't scare you, did I, Tarva? Noah murmured. I snorted. No. I'm just trying to stop Earth's foreign relations from imploding on week 1. For the sake of argument, let's say you piss off the Neviks. The Federation will parade them around, using them as proof that you can't be allies with humanity. And then, we lose the undecided votes. Exactly. There is too much at stake, for all of us. A soft beep indicated that the diagnostic was complete, and we returned our attention to the computer. A holographic avatar of the shuttle zoomed into the ship's underbelly. It highlighted a long pipe in blinking red. An auto-generated note indicated that cooling fluid was leaking. The shaft was nestled right next to the warp drive, so it didn't take an engineer to figure its purpose. That part of the ship was only accessible from the exterior. Fixing it would require a spacewalk. My immediate suspicion was that someone had tampered with the vessel. Mainly because the pipe leaked just enough that it wouldn't cause immediate alarm or breakdown in range of the Kolshan surveillance team. But who would have sabotaged us? What was their motive? So it was the cooling system, the human said calmly. Stop the ship. I'll get a vac suit and try to patch her up. I flicked my ears. No. You need to stay here and keep an eye on everyone. Why? I suspect foul play. Deliberate damage. If it's one of the species on board, they could be trying to lure you off the ship. That way, they can take all of us out, without having to fight a predator. Noah squinted in confusion. It was refreshing that the ambassador didn't panic at the first hint of danger. His reaction was cool and calculating. The human lacked a full understanding of the situation, and I suspected he disliked the uncertainty more than the peril. That makes zero sense. Who would do such a thing? I don't know. That's what I want to find out. If our vessel went missing in no man's land, with all of humanity's allies on board, you know who would foot the blame. He frowned. Always me, isn't it? I flicked my ears in acknowledgement. Noah shook his head in disgust. Unfortunately, humanity had no shortage of enemies within the Federation. The two of us needed to talk it over, and work out anyone who could have a possible angle. Ruling out the 5 species on board was our top priority, since they would be an immediate threat. Of course, it could be someone on Resel's ship. I wonder if they ran into any trouble, or if this was only targeted at the human, I thought. I don't know where to start. I slammed a paw on the console, stressed at the prospect of ship-wide interrogation. There could be any number of parties involved, someone inside or outside our group. An ally or an enemy. How do we even begin to narrow the field? Let's start with who we think it couldn't be, Noah growled. Can we clear anyone on this ship? Someone we can account for, or are almost certain they're fine. I trust Chow Sun. Really? I don't know about him. He's never been unkind to you, which is saying a lot. That's exactly why he's suspicious, Tarva. He's too nice. What if he's up to something? The Zeruleans were the only ones to reach out before the vote. Also, as you know, we do an awful job controlling our instincts. Chow Sun couldn't fake not being afraid of a predator. He pranced up to you while his head was dripping blood. The ambassador tapped his foot a few times, and a touch of relief flickered in his brown eyes. It saddened me that mistreatment was so commonplace for him, that normal interaction triggered alarm bells in his head. The Zerulean scientist was the only person I'd seen attempt to squash his instincts in his first meeting with a human. If we trusted Chow Sun, bringing him into the loop might not be the worst idea. 3 minds were better than 2, and he was intelligent enough not to jump to conclusions. Besides, someone needed to mend the cooling shaft damage. I would volunteer, except that with my technical know-how, I was more likely to make the warp core spontaneously combust. The fewer people know the true reason for our predicament, the better. Let's hope Chow Sun can keep his mouth shut when asked. Sharing my suspicions with the entire ship would only incite panic and lead to infighting and accusations. Knowing how paranoid some species were about predators, they would find a way to blame Noah. Because obviously, the nefarious human would cripple his ride home after weeks of imprisonment for some illusory goal. It made perfect sense, if you didn't think about it. I sighed. Do not tell anyone anything other than that we're fixing a minor problem. I'm going to fetch Chow Sun. The human nodded. If anyone could sniff out deceit, it would be an observant predator like Noah. One way or another, we were going to get to the bottom of this debacle. I suppose it was too much to ask for these introductions to be smooth sailing, and for Earth to attain some genuine allies without any hiccups. When I ascertained the responsible party, they were going to receive some harsh retribution, courtesy of the Human-Venlil Alliance. Date, Standardized Human Time, October 4, 2136. The shuttle halted a few parsecs short of Venlil space, until the necessary repairs were complete. This delay tacked hours to our travel time, but none of the other options were reasonable. If the drive overheated, the ensuing explosion would bring about our swift demise. I wondered how the passengers reacted to our sudden stop, and my refusal to explain any details. Chow Sun hadn't taken any convincing to come to our aid, even after he processed the murky truth. He was pacing back and forth now, pink tongue lolling out of his mouth. With his quadrupedal stature, the Zerulean barely surpassed the human's knee. Noah was biting his lip, and I assumed the predator was holding back a reaction to the adorable scientist. Now was not the time to divulge that wrinkle to our new friend. Especially when that furry guy was the potential ally we were most optimistic about. I sorted through the shape-conforming vac suits, picking out one designed for small quadrupeds. Strong magnets fixed a standardized toolbox to one sleeve, serving on a few science vessels prepared Chow Sun for basic repairs. Thanks again for helping us. Do you think this is something you can handle? I asked. I'll do my best, Tarva. The Zerulean wiggled into the suit, baring his teeth in discomfort. The fabric must feel restricting in all the wrong places. We only need it to hold together long enough to get a few parsecs. Let's just try to minimize the stress on the warp drive. Slow and steady, I confirmed. Oh, and remember, this is our secret. We don't want anyone else getting wind of this. You really think it's someone here? Why would they damage a ship they're on, with a, Noah rolled his arboreal eyes. Predator. It's okay. You can say it. Chow Sun winced. Yeah. I don't see the logic of that plan. If everyone were logical, this all would have been much easier, I responded. It's just a possibility, for now. Honestly, it's more likely that it's someone outside this group. But some people would sacrifice themselves, in a heartbeat, to fight flesh-eating monstrosities. I can feel the love, the human growled. You'd be better off to seek respect, rather than love. Chow Sun struggled with his headgear, fumbling with the clip. Love can be quite the fleeting emotion, you know. The quadruped flicked his ears with annoyance, and Noah helped him click the helmet into place. Those opposable thumbs were more useful than most species' toes and claws. I was impressed by how fast the Terran picked up on alien nonverbal cues, given how little he had actually been told. The Zerolian gave the tether on his chest a final tug, ensuring it was fastened. He shimmied into the crawl space, and there was a click as the emergency airlock unsealed. Left alone with me, Noah's composition dissolved. A smile tugged at his lips, and he allowed a fawning look into his gaze. Seeing Chow Sun dressed up in a spacesuit, with those little teddy bear ears, Tarva, my heart feels real fuzzy, the ambassador declared. Amusement flared within my sternum. No clue what a teddy bear is. I guess Venlil aren't cute to you anymore, if we've been replaced so easily. Don't go getting all jealous on me, now. Am I not allowed to think the entire galaxy is cute? You think the Arxer are cute? Damn you. You know that wasn't what I meant. You said the entire. I know what I said. And honestly, maybe baby Arxer are cute. We think pretty much any youngling is cute, even the mean or ugly ones. You've got to be shitting me. You're really doubling down on that? I am. What are you gonna do about it? A chuckle trilled from my chest, picturing the predator cooing at baby reptilians. That would be stretching their nurturing instincts a little too far for my liking. Humans' fierce protectiveness of their offspring was something I noticed in their earliest transmissions. It would be interesting to meet a little primate. Despite their eyes, their innocence and enthusiasm looked endearing. It's wonderful that Noah and I's friendship is so easygoing, and that we can mess around now. He would have apologized for the implication before this trip, instead of recognizing that I was kidding. I gave the human a playful headbutt. I'm going to make us focus on potential culprits. We need to go over the list of species on board, pronto. With any luck, we can clear most of them. Maybe all of them. Fine. Noah's grin dissolved, and the teasing edge leapt from his intonation. Let's start with the Mazik. Even as a reluctant ally, I doubt he'll ever like me. It was tough to reconcile President Cupo's ridicule during Noah's speech with the potential of friendship. The human had attempted to brush any past incidents off, fielding his critical questions on our voyage with aplomb. At least the Mazik was touching on genuine topics and listening to the given responses. Still, mistrust flowed from Cupo at every turn. He stated himself that his vote stemmed from the Federation's desperation against the Arxer alone. There was little more dangerous than a man with nothing left to lose. Not to mention that Noah's first thought was that the president was only partaking in this foray to stir up trouble. The Maziks would be my prime suspect, if it weren't for the fact that their figurehead was present in the flesh. Surely a planetary leader would send a stand-in to carry out devious plans. Why would he cause disruption to his planet's governance, other than as a show of good faith? Cupo came himself, I replied. It would be like me going on a suicide mission. I wouldn't be the first candidate the Venlil proposed. Leadership is important, I suppose, but that isn't a full exoneration. Ugh, alright, what about the Neviks? You're just picking the ones you don't like first. So what if I am? The Nevik representative put on quite the performance for the Predator, perhaps with the belief that playing up her derision would impress him. Tassa's haughtiness had the opposite effect, though. Her ability to quarrel with Noah suggested either she was brave, or the heated dislike was mutual. Predetermined hate was a fine motive to ensure human diplomacy failed. However, the Nevik government had more to gain from trade than most other species. The Terrans would be creating more ships than anyone, in their rush to fortify their fleet. A lucrative defense contract could keep them sated for years. War was profitable for manufacturing powers. I think Tassa dislikes Lalo more than you, I snorted. The Nevik Imperium are using you for economic benefit, if you hadn't already figured that out. They don't accomplish anything from getting us all stranded in space. Noah scratched his chin. But what if they did get something? What if someone like the crocodile paid them off? While the Neviks could be bribed, their price would be steep enough that you could buy a whole colony instead. If I were an outside actor, I'd do it myself, or find a cheaper entity to do my bidding. It doesn't have to be their government, Tarva. It could be a rogue actor, a single person who was swayed and broke with official policy. We don't have to assign blame to an entire species. Sure. But I think you just want it to be the Neviks, so that you can gag their diplomat. That is a baseless accusation. Right, I'm going to move on. That just leaves the Sivkit and the Yodel. It would be simpler to make a determination about Axley if we had gotten more than a sentence out of her this whole trip. She displayed more skittishness than the rest of us combined. What if that extreme terror stemmed from concerns of the Predator catching her treachery? That, or her pre-existing fear had driven her to act against humanity. However, her open cowardice didn't mesh with the profile of a martyr or fanatic. I'd expect a little more hatred and reproach from such an enemy after witnessing the sadistic behavior of Sovlin. Though it was a long shot, it would satisfy me if the humans captured that officer during their war. I wouldn't blame the UN for executing the Gojid on the spot. If Sovlin somehow survived, I'd want him tried in our courts for throwing a wounded Venmal in a filthy cage with a predator. Not that Marcel was ever going to eat Slanik, but that was the captain's intent. That's attempted murder. Noah tilted his head. Right now, the only thing the Sivkits are guilty of is a poor choice of personnel. That's a bit harsh. Everyone copes with fear differently. I pinned my ears against my head, recalling how disastrous first contact was. My diplomatic advisor passed out at your initial smile, but now, he loves humans. Axley might warm up to you too. Axley? That's her name. Gotcha. Now, on to the Yodel. I sensed the marsupial was Noah's favorite. That said, of the species on board, Uplifts had the most to gain from a ploy. Outfoxing a predator was the ultimate display of intellect. It would be the swiftest way to silence any primitive jabs. This sabotage could be a calculated risk to garner respect from some Federation peers. Come to think of it, Lalo was the one who blurted out that the cooling shaft was the culprit. The fact that it was just as he said was an oddity of itself. That he hadn't wavered, while being discredited and badgered by his colleagues, was even stranger. Either the Yodel had familiarized himself with mechanical knowledge to impress the human, or he had known about the pipe's defectiveness prior. That alone is pretty incriminating. I'm surprised I didn't catch on to that sooner. The puzzling bit was why Lalo would offer that information, if he was responsible. Someone who was setting up a drive explosion shouldn't want that problem rectified before it paid dividends. The Uplift might have known that a diagnostic would reveal the issue and decided to cut his losses. He could always move on to Plan B. My tail drooped between my legs. How did the Yodel know what the issue was, immediately? Well, just because he's an Uplift doesn't mean he's an idiot. I didn't say that, Noah. Every other passenger, including myself, and you, had no idea. We've been around ships our whole adult lives. It could be a lucky guess. Maybe Lalo's studying to be a mechanic. We haven't talked about our personal aspirations. Even then, there wasn't a trace of doubt. He stated it as fact, not preceded by an "I think" clause. It was like he knew he was right. The Predator was quiet, and I sensed him replaying the exact words in his head. Noah's disappointment was obvious. Protecting the Yodel was the most passion I'd seen from the ambassador since his desperate plea on the Federation floor. Humanity would love to take a fledgling species under their wing and explore the galaxy together. My friend cursed and slammed his fist into a wall. The human bent over at once, clutching that hand to his stomach. His binocular eyes were narrowed to slits, while his teeth were on full display. His uncontrolled breathing was animalistic, punctuated by furious grunts. Was the Terran still in control during this fit of predatory rage? My instincts shadowed my consciousness for the first time in a while. I'd never seen sweet Noah like this. It took all of my willpower to step forward and place a shaking paw on his arm. "You're hurting yourself more than the wall," I squeaked. "It doesn't feel pain." "I know that." His lips twitched as he nursed his injured hand. "But fuck. I don't want it to be Lalo." The Yodel were a newer species who don't have historic prejudices against us. We don't know it's him. Let's not overreact. But you were right. It doesn't make sense how he knew, with such confidence, from that one sound. Why is the whole galaxy so unfair? Everyone is so fucking hateful. Silence was my answer, as much as I wanted to offer soothing words. I didn't know how to handle an angry human, or at what point they presented a threat to those around them. It was possible that my intended response would exacerbate the problem. Trusting Noah to calm down on his own might be best. I took a deep breath and turned my back to the furious human. It felt wrong to leave myself unguarded, at least while he was in attack mode. Forcing my eyes open, I searched through a mini fridge. There was no ice, but hopefully, a cold water pouch would suffice. The burning in my chest eased once I stood upright, and the predator was back in my vision. My claws wrapped around Noah's wrist, cluing me into his racing pulse. The ambassador allowed me to move the aching hand, and it slackened in my grip. I gently pressed the water container to his knuckles. At least that would ease any physical pain. "Thanks, Tarva." Sorry for blowing up in your face." The human's dilated eyes met mine for a moment, before he looked away. "I have your support, don't I?" "Always," I whispered. "Good. Now let's get back to the others, before Cupo barges in here, asking a million questions. Shozen's going to be a while. We're not going to detain Lalo, or at least interrogate him. If I tie up the Yodel now, how are the others going to react? My explanation won't matter. This needs to be handled quietly. It's better to act somewhere that we're in complete control." "Fair point. I can pull him off to the side when we land on Venlil Prime." The predator offered his uninjured hand, and I accepted it with an eye roll. Mischief played in his brown irises, as his fingers intertwined with my claws. One nail tickled the fur right under my paw pad, which caused me to yank my limb back. A hint of a smirk tugged at his face, as the affectionate moment of solidarity was ruined. I pointed toward the control room exit. "Start walking, or I'm going to start calling you Predator Noah, too." His eyebrows shot up. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I would, right in front of your dear friend, Tassa." "Test me." "Fine, fine. I'm going now." Noah's strides were poised and confident, a far cry from the raving beast I saw minutes ago. I followed him into the cabin, and our return caused the guests to break off their discussions. Axley had been speaking with Cupo, but she skittered away at the human's return. She couldn't keep doing this for the entirety of her visit. There were going to be hundreds of UN personnel on site when we docked. "Welcome back, Ambassador Noah," Lalo yipped. "Thanks. You were right about the cooling shaft." The predator's tone was light with false cordiality, and he settled across from the marsupial. "Quite clever deduction. We'll be back up and running within the next few hours, I hope." The uplift flicked his ears in acknowledgement. Under the human's watchful eye, I trusted that the Yodel couldn't pull off any shenanigans. We just needed to maintain a facade of normalcy for a little longer, before we could press our suspect on his involvement. Part of me hoped that our theory was wild speculation, that it could be disproved, for Noah's sake. After our lengthy ordeal, both of us were beset by paranoia. I hoped this investigation wouldn't dampen the Terran reception to their new friends. If nothing else panned out, the Zeruleans looked like they might be better neighbors than us. This could still be a positive endeavor overall, that would lend humanity a diplomatic foothold within the galaxy. We didn't have to let one rotten fruit spoil the barrel. Thanks for watching till the end. Hit the like button, it really helps out the channel, and click the subscribe button to keep up to date with new episode drops. Always keep a watchful eye on the stars. And see you next time.